Hello, welcome back to the ministry. And today we're doing a review of the movie Time Cop. I felt like I needed to do it, and it almost is going to piggyback off of what we did with Deja Vu. Um, to me, it feels like that's one side of the story, and Time Cop is almost what would happen on the opposite side. Okay, because that was before the marriage when they were trying to find you, all this kind of stuff. But Time Cop is after. So this may be relevant for somebody afterwards. I don't know, but we just gonna flow through. So the movie begins in an old Confederate state. Way back, I don't know what year that was. And at the time frame, the man was coming back to get gold, okay? To steal gold. He ran into the settlers that were carrying the gold, and the settlers were like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" And they were like, and he was like, "I want your gold." And they were like, "I don't understand. Don't you get that we are 5 Confederate officers and we will shoot you dead?" And he said, "You don't understand. I'm going to ask politely, can I have the gold?" He was being polite. And what ended up happening is he ended up taking out 2 Uzis, guns, and killing all 5 of the officers and taking the gold. So they ended up in a meeting in Washington, D.C., and I'm not sure what year this was. I think it was supposed to be 2004. But the movie was made in 87. So they are trying to figure out what exactly needs to be done in order to prepare. And I think it actually was 10 years earlier than that, because they were just determining that they wanted to make this task force over time. So it must have been set in 1994, this particular scene. So they're sitting there having the discussion of how this could be an issue for security reasons. And this is literally the oversight team for Washington, D.C. saying, yeah, we can't have this, and we need to create this team, and we need to have an entire force to be able to police people going back and forth through time, because there are obviously people that are doing this, and it could be an issue because the gold bullion that was found was the Confederate bullion, but it was used now, and when they went back, the people were killed with guns from this time frame. So we have an issue. We need to take care of it. We need to create a task force in order to prevent these types of things from happening. So they had Senator at the time, McComb, who was on the team that was going to pretty much fund or be a part of the overseeing of this development process of these cops. Okay, that's been taken care of. But time goes forward, and you see, I believe it is October 9th, and you see the cop, whose name is Max Walker, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme. He meets his wife in the mall. A guy steals a woman's bag, right? And He stops the guy and tells him to take the bag back. He goes and meets his wife, and he has this little cute little saying that he says with his wife, which is, "It's not enough time to satisfy a beautiful woman." And his wife says to him, well, what's her response? She always says back to him, then they totally skipped my mind. She pretty much responds that if that's the case, that then you should not waste any time or something like that. And she said if her husband is not standing behind her, she'll go home with him. It's pretty much what she says. So she turns around, and of course it's her husband, and she kisses him, and they get ready to leave. She takes a picture with him. This is a photograph that we later see in the film. So she says to him, "You're going to be happy that you took that photograph." And the guy that took the picture said, "Keeping your memories," or something like that. He had a foreign accent. And then they left to spend the afternoon together, which, as married couples do. It was a rainy afternoon. Both of them were off. They went home and did the do that they do. You know what they did. Anyway, he was going in that night to be brought in on his shift because they wanted to bring him in to be part of the new task force. But he was going in for the interview to talk about becoming part of the task force, and he didn't know whether he was going to take the job or not. But he had the hours for that shift, and him and his wife ended up in a little bit of a disagreement. But while they're in a disagreement, somebody breaks in the house. He saw earlier that day 2 guys watching him, but he didn't know why they were watching him. But he didn't forget that they were. So he ends up in a major fight with these 2 gentlemen, and something happens to him. He ends up being dragged outside. They fight. He ends up outside. His wife is at the window being held hostage, and before he can go back in the house, because they shot him, but he had on a protective vest, so he didn't die. But when he ran to go in the house to get her, the house blows up. And then you see him looking like a mess after seeing his house blow up and his wife in it. What am I trying to say? In a case, if your God-ordained spouse has not taken care of certain elements prior to marrying you, these things may come back to haunt him. Okay? This was an attack that happened after this man got married. I don't know how long he was married to her, but they were still in their honeymoon phase of their marriage. And we know that the honeymoon phase can last anywhere from a year to the first 5. So he was still very attentive to her. And this attack occurs. And as you can see, the attack was against her and destroying the house they built. Okay? She had news for him, but she never got to tell it. Okay? What am I sensing here? I'm going to tell you already she was pregnant. Okay? We as the women have been carrying something for a long time. But the thing that we're carrying, it's imperative our husbands are part of that process. But there is an enemy that of course is lurking, that senses you, sees you, and knows that you are coming and or are there. When you come into these marriages, yes, you will be able to have a season of rest. Absolutely. You're going to be able to enjoy your marriage. Dana Ray just recently did a word called cross-check. I don't know the rest of it, but if you look for the cross-check in Dana Ray, it'll come up. And she talks about you will be allotted to have a season. And I've heard a lot of people saying this, that when you have this season, you will have bliss in this season. But don't get too comfortable. You're going to be able to enjoy your marriage. You're going to be able to enjoy your husband. But do understand, for those of you that have spouses, and the Lord has already confirmed to you that they're in high power and high positions. Some of them are being prepared to be positioned in high powered positions. And because of that, the attack that is coming to the household is specifically to destroy the house and you. Why? Because you are the strongest person that has the ability, because if you have prophetic ability, you can warn your spouse. You have the ability to prevent them from coming into contact with calamity. You've got wisdom. Not only that, you're carrying something that he needs. And what you're carrying, the enemy does not want to make it over into this space. But most importantly, he does not want your spouse to elevate to the position that he's going to elevate to, because it could very well destroy him later. Go back and look at Exodus 23. I believe it's 30 through 33. Because when you and your spouse come together, what's going to happen? You will go into your promised land, make a home for yourself, and thereby be able to go in and destroy the plans of the enemy. But if you also read that last part of that scripture, it talks about it will not be destroyed immediately. It's year by year he will take it out. These people had been married. It didn't say they were newlyweds, meaning they just got married. They looked like they'd been married for a couple years, but they just still had the romance left in their relationship. You and your spouse going to be together, and God's going to give you instructions. But as you are preparing to go back out into the world, he was about to take a new job, meaning that he was going to be elevated into a new position. Some of your spouses are going to be elevated into new positions after y'all get married, but it may take 6 months, a year, 2 years. And during this time, God is going to be prepping and preparing you. Go back and watch my review on chess moves from the Breaking Dawn film. Okay? You're going to go through a preparation, but you're also going to build your home on your land, all of this kind of stuff. But it's very imperative that when he comes out and he is positioned, that you know that there will be an attempted attack, because now the enemy knows where you are. Remember, I'm being reminded of the scripture of Elisha. When Elijah was told to step out, and he told Obadiah to tell the king where he was. There's going to come a point in time when your God ordained spouse is going to have to step back out there after he's gotten the instructions. But what the Lord is going to allow is you're going to be in a secure place while you're prepping. But when God says go back out, your enemies is going to now know where you are. And he's going to see you. Okay? So, in this, his wife and the house were blown up. But he does become part of the task force. Let's fast forward in time. It's, I believe, now it's October 2004. So it's been about 10 years since his wife died. So you're seeing back in 1964, I think it was, a man who is on Wall Street in the 1960s going up to his office, but you end up finding out that he's in that time frame betting on the stock market. Pay attention. There are things, and I'm being reminded of the scene back in Now You See Me, when the cops were waiting for the show to start. The female cop made mention of the book when the magician had potentially planted a card in a tree and waited for the tree to grow around it. Some things, Lord, you want me to say this? Some things that the government has done, they were planned years ago. There's an old video clip, and it's probably still on YouTube, from the 1960s. And that's probably why God wants me to mention this. Of I don't know whether it was a pastor, but it was a leader at the time. And it's an old, grainy, black and white clip. And the man was telling of things that we've seen happen in the past 30 years. 30 to 40 some odd years. He talked about certain things happening with groceries, certain things happening on the societal plane. And all of it has happened. This man went back in time to alter financial records. And he went back that if it was 2004 and that's the 1960s, that means he was trying to make money up to 40 years ahead of time. There are plans that the government has been working for 40 years. Most people don't recognize them because it's been so long. And the long game was to distract, but systematically prepare people for what it was they were planning to do years out. One of the ministers I follow, she talks about having a documented record of something that was a systematic plan governmentally for the people. And I'm going to leave that right there. But the enemy doesn't think that he's going to get caught. The enemy doesn't think God's going to stop him. See, time cops, the point was to stop the crime from occurring ahead of time. What are prophets? Prophets can see ahead of time what it is that's going to happen and go into prayer, go into consecration, do whatever it is that the Lord is leading them to do that will spiritually block the maneuver that the enemy has. This is why prophets are attacked so much. Because they have a word in their mouth and they can hear and see things before they happen, and they can position themselves to stop it spiritually, and naturally it will not occur. Enemy don't want that. So Max Walker pops out of a portal. Now we can go into portals too. There are actual portals. Years ago, I heard 2 ministers talking about the CERN portal. And this is one that the government don't want nobody to know about. I'm just going to leave that right there. But every time it's activated, you start seeing a higher rate of crime and violence in whatever area that it was used. That's all I'm going to say right there. Next, he shows up. Once he shows up, he's talking to his friend. Forget what his friend's name was. This guy, the one that was doing the embezzlement of the stock market. He's like, dude, I know. It's like, just leave me here. We don't have to go back. We can't go back. I can't go back. And he's like, I gotta take you back. What you mean? You can't go back. I have to take you back. And he pins him to the corner and he's telling him, I gotta take you back. And he said, no, you don't understand. McCone owns everything. If I go back, he gonna kill my family. He gonna kill this. He gonna do that. He gonna destroy everything. I can't go back. And he's like, what you mean, McCone? And he's like, McCone. He's like, you're bullying me. That you telling me McCone owns everything? He's like, yes. He's sending people back to go get the money from certain places. Why you think I'm here? He needs it for his presidency. So he's sending people back. He's got half of the time cops under his payroll. He's sending them back. It's a crooked scheme internally. And he's like, what? He's like, yes, he owns half of the police force. So he's like, okay, I hear you. So you're going to go back and you're going to tell the, the board that was going to do whatever it is to him for the trial. He's like, you're going to tell them that. He's like, I can't tell them that. They'll kill my family. He's like, you're going to tell them and we're going to work this out. So he runs to jump out the window and Max Walker follows him. He jumps out the window behind him and he grabs his leg, hits the thing on his side that was the device that brought him there. And they end up back at headquarters. And he's talking to him while they're going to the courtroom. And he's like, just tell them what you need to tell them. And then we'll work it out from there. They can protect you. He's like, no, they cannot. So he goes before the court. And he's standing there next to him like, if you just tell him. And he's like, no, I ain't going to say nothing. And then they like, So, is there anything that you have to say? You've been charged with crimes against this, that, and the other. You went back to extort for money and this, that, and the other. Do you have a plea for yourself? And his partner says no. He says yes. The judge is like, do y'all need to discuss something real quick? And he's like, tell them. And he's like, I can't. And it's like, fine. Well, we sentenced you to go right back to where you were. You were about to die, so we're just going to let you let that be your sentence. So they sent him back, and he went back to the point where he had thrown himself out the window, and he just crashed and hit the ground. There was a bellhop that was standing there, and he was like, oh, it's just another one of those days then. Because people at that time, due to the stock market crash, were throwing themselves out of windows. This happens every time the stock market crashes, every 20-something to 30-odd years. Notice that? So he's sitting there, and guess what? McComb comes into the office, and he's like, oh, so you're here. And his boss is sitting there, he's like, I want to talk to you. And his boss like, I can't talk right now. McComb is here. And he's like, now, if you would like to come. And he's like, nah, I wouldn't. Too bad. Come on anyway. So he had to come. So the whole time that they walking, going through the, his boss is talking to McComb, but he's standing there and he making snide remarks like, I know what I know about you. So they just, you know how men do. They having their conversation amongst one another. And he's like, I'm going to get you. And he's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. But as soon as McComb leaves, he's in his vehicle. And he's like, we need to stop him. We got to get him. We got to do whatever it is we need to do. Because whatever it is, it can't. No. This can't happen. You got a day spouse. You got a day spouse. Remember how I said back in Now You See Me, he was a double agent? You got a day spouse has gathered a certain amount of information. And the information in which he's gathered, his enemies don't want him to have it, because what he has the ability to position him in a way that's going to foil their plots and their plans. This is just a natural thing that would actually happen, but it's going to prevent them from being able to do what it is that they need to do. And they have yet to figure out how he got the information or what he has at this point. But they know that he's the target. So what they intend to do, he goes home because he's still mourning his wife, who's been dead for about 10 years at this point. He's watching an old tape of her when she wanted to build a birdhouse that looked like a Victorian house that was similar to the house that they live in. And he was repeating every word he said off the videotape, and then he fell asleep drinking whatever it was he was drinking. The next morning, 2 assassins come to try to take him out. He takes them out, electrocutes one, and the other one, I think he just straightly kills him. And one gets thrown out the door. Right then, Fielding, a female cop, comes up, and 2 cops coming up behind her, they're like, and she says, go in the apartment. And he's telling them, these people came into my apartment, they tried to kill me, and he's telling her that the time cop office is full of whatchamacallit, meaning people that have turned. Because she actually was part of internal affairs, because they now are investigating him because he knows this. So when he gets back to the office, he goes to his boss like, what is she doing? And he said, well, because of the fact that you knew what you knew about McComb, now they're investigating you. He's like, oh, really? And he said, this is a setup. Because McComb knows that I know, so because he knows, he's trying to hem me up. And he's like, I don't even care. You're the one that wanted to go after McComb, so if you wanted to go after Nicole, you're going to have to deal with it, because she going to investigate. And she keep coming to the door. He keeps shutting the door in her face. Remember? This is even line, and I wasn't even planning to talk about, whatchamacallit. Now You See Me. But remember, he was pulled off of a case. The character in that film was pulled off of a case and pulled onto the case with the other woman that represented the kingdom spouse. This individual is pulled on. There are people that are surrounding your God ordained spouse. Either they are or they will be when he comes back. Okay? I even talked about this in the word that I just released, where there are people that have positioned themselves and or will position themselves to try to deter and or stop your God ordained spouse in what he's doing. Okay? It was to destroy the marriage, right? I talked about this in that. What is it? Financial solvency, the worst attack against your marriage. Yeah. Your husband, when he returns to what capacity he's going to return to, they're going to be having people on his behind, because they now know that he knows. And now that you're in the picture, of course they're going to have. They thought that by taking his wife out, that was going to distract him. Actually, that did the opposite effect. It made him more gung-ho about doing his job correctly. For you, this means that your God ordained spouse, he's working for God. But there are enemies amongst him. I'm being reminded of the scripture. A great door has been opened before you, but there are many adversaries. There are people that are going to even be positioned when he is entered. Go back and read the book of David. It's not the book of David. It's the book of Kings. I think it's 2 Kings. It's either 2 Kings or 2 Samuel. After David